Now you got your wine now, and you're good
wine.
to go.
You missed everything. Don't worry about
abuse.
It's cool. I'm saying you just had to argue about getting some wine. This is the man podcast, and you know she's mad at you for drinking wine, like you said. You should have a beer. She said
it's a beer in there too. But if I would have grabbed that, I'd have been corny for drinking that too.
Well, we got a guest over here. Please introduce yourself.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on. I'm Len May. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Endocannà-Health.
So break that down to us. What is Endocannà-Health for people who don't know, or people listening and everything like that?
Yeah, so we are a DNA company. We do genetic sequencing and genotyping to help use your DNA to guide you to a precision therapeutic experience. First of all, looking at your endocannabinoid system, and then looking at things that are associated with your endocannabinoid system, like things like nutrient deficiencies, vitamin deficiencies. So the idea is precision medicine that's personalized to you based on your DNA.
Whoa.
Okay. So, all right. So I'm gonna be candid here,
Yeah.
and say that we obviously read your bio, and there was a lot of words I did not understand. So I'm gonna start off by saying you're a real deal scientist, right?
I'm a sciencey guy. I wouldn't say that I'm a scientist because when I was going to school, they didn't give classes in cannabis or endocannabinoid system. So it had to be, sort of you learn on your own. And I worked with a lot of scientists. And I picked up a lot of things from them, but I work with a lot of smarter people than myself. But the idea is, look, we all have this endocannabinoid system, right? Would it be helpful if I can give like a 30-second overview of what the endocannabinoid system is?
Yeah, please do.
Yes, we need that.
So the endocannabinoid system is our primary modulating system. The goal of the endocannabinoid system is to maintain balance, or what's called homeostasis, for each individual. And the way that it does that, we all have this system. The way that it does that, it gets signals from all the other systems within our bodies, like our immune system or digestive system. And it sends that signal like salmon swimming upstream, up your central nervous system. And then the endocannabinoid system releases endogenous, which means within, endogenous neurochemicals or endogenous endocannabinoids. The two that it releases are called anandamide. So the word anand in Sanskrit means bliss. So this is your bliss hormone. The second one is called 2-AG. So we have these natural neurochemicals that are pumped into our bloodstream from our brain. And that's the goal, to manage the balance all the other systems. So what happens is, and how cannabis really works and how it becomes a part of our lives is, when we actually have deficiencies in our own natural producing endocannabinoid system, we're lucky we found this plant in nature that has phytocannabinoids, which are cannabinoids that come from a plant, that bind to our receptors that we already have throughout our body and our brain, and it helps release those endogenous endocannabinoids, those neurochemicals. So to give you an example, without using big words, and I'll try not to actually get really sciencey, but let's say that we're both consuming cannabis, right? So THC, when you actually light it and you heat it up, it converts the acid molecule. Yep, exactly. The acid molecule from the plant converts to delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, THC. When it does that, we have a receptor in our brain, in our bodies, called the CB1 receptor. That THC binds to that receptor and releases anandamide. So remember, it's a bliss hormone. So that's the hormone that makes us feel euphoria, like gets us high. It actually stimulates appetite. It acts as an analgesic, so pain reliever, and it helps to stimulate mood, etc. And then CBD, the other major phytocannabinoid, that binds to your CB2 receptors. And we have CB2 receptors throughout our body, usually mostly in our immune, our digestive systems, etc. And when that binds, it releases this other neurochemical called 2-AG. And that one main goal is to help reduce inflammation and help to balance your immune system. So the idea is, when we have these imbalances that we can't produce ourselves, the plant helps us get our body back in balance.
Wow. So
That is awesome.
Word.
yeah.
I feel all of those things every time.
There you go. Exactly.
Especially the bliss part. The bliss
Exactly.
part and the we call it the we call it the fuck it mode. Like, fuck it. You know what I mean? When you start smoking, Kev, no, you've been there.
Yeah, I've been
you know
there.
Like, fuck it. You know what I'm saying?
If I have something important to do, I will not.
He will not
take an edible because it just makes me like, you don't have to do that.
Yeah, but see, an edible is different, right? So what happens with an edible when you eat? So the way that you consume cannabis, and that's why it's all a personalized, individualized experience. Okay. When you actually eat it, THC goes into your digestive system. Your liver converts that THC, what you're smoking on, it converts it to another substance called 11-oxyhydroxide. So your liver converts it, then it goes up to your bloodstream, binds your receptors, but it's a different experience, 5 to 50 times more powerful than smoking or consuming sublingually under your tongue. So you can have a completely different experience. And some people that have predispositions to like stress reactivity, anxiety, etc., they can have a very intense experience with an edible. It can last a lot longer.
So,
yes, yeah, we've seen
that. We've seen that happen to our other hosts.
he actually. I mean, I know you're new to our podcast, but if you actually go back into the history of when we kind of first started, I guess that was within our first year.
Yeah. No,
it was our second year. It was within the second year. It was a couple years ago, and
I'll never forget.
I gave Dre a piece of one of my edibles. Is chocolate bar.
It was two pieces.
It was a piece. It was maybe this big, bro. And he ate it and was like, "Oh, this is good." And then by the end of the show, he was like, "I gotta go outside, guys. I'm over. This show's over for me." And we had to shut the show down.
His legs didn't work. He couldn't breathe. Yeah. And if he fell asleep, he was never going to wake up again.
Yeah. And then, but there was two.
I was going to say we have a guest here who can actually maybe attest to this. I don't smoke weed at all, and at the time I was on a diet which didn't include meat. Now I tried to tell them why that makes sense, and they always say, "What does not eating meat have to do with anything?" And I said, for some reason, even when you're drinking, even like you feel the effects of these things a little bit more. Like a little bit more than you would, it'll be a little bit more intense than you would if you are eating meat or just on a regular diet of just, junk food. Do you have anything like comparable to that? Because they say it and they think I'm crazy.
He is crazy.
A little bit.
I told you he is crazy. I try to explain to him like,
I haven't eaten meat in 13 years, and it actually has to do with how you metabolize. So everybody has a different metabolic system, and the way that we metabolize controls the effect that you get from edibles. So we have, and I'll get a little bit sciencey, but we have these series of genes called cytochrome P450, CYP450. So each one of these genes produces an enzyme that metabolizes something that we consume. So there's one for lactose, there's one for gluten, there's one for THC. Actually, it's called CYP2C9. There's one for CBD, which is called CYP2C19, and then one for CBD and THC together, which is CYP3A4. But here's the thing. If you're a poor metabolizer of THC and you consume, an edible, when the conversion of 11-oxyhydroxide happens, you're a poor metabolizer. The onset is slower. And it can be 5 to 50, like I said before. It can be a much more powerful onset. And it can be an experience that actually gives you a body high first, so you feel in your body. And then it binds to that receptor again and gives you that brain high. And if you have other predispositions to like stress reactivity or PTSD or slow rate of fear extinction, it can actually turn on like light switches. It can turn on your genetic predisposition to a stressful event. So now you're getting high, you're starting to feel it, because it's not like smoking weed. We smoke a joint, it hits you right away and you know exactly what the feeling's going to be. This one creeps up on you and it stays for a while. And then it takes a long time for it to, and if it triggers something else, now you can have a true stressful event. So you have to know how you metabolize. I try to avoid, personally, I'm not a big edible guy. I can smoke a blunt and be fine and no issue, but an edible, and I'm a normal metabolizer of THC. But if I'm consuming THC, CBD, and other terpenes, etc., with it, it can actually, I can't control my experience the same way I would do with like consuming a combustible, smoking it. So yeah, that's
so in layman's term, Dre's a lightweight. That's basically what he said. For those who didn't pick up when he was putting down, Dre's a lightweight. But Kev ain't though. Kev ain't though.
I'm good. So Lynn, when was the first time you was introduced to cannabis? Like, when was your first time?
Yeah. So I was the kid that was in school, and I would sit there and all these windows would pop in my head and I would daydream and I can't pay attention. And so my parents were like, well, when I get stimulated, when I want to do well, I focus. But other than that, I can't focus. So my parents started taking me to the doctor. They're like, he's an underachiever. So I got diagnosed with ADD, and they put me on prescription medication starting when I was in my early teens. And I was going to, I think it was 8th grade, and I was going into class, and I used to play tennis for like the team in the morning. So my mom would drop me off at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and I get to school early, and these kids were hanging out and they were smoking cigarettes. And I was like, hey, you want to smoke a cigarette with us? I'm like, yeah, cool. Hanging out with the cool kids or smoke a cigarette. I'll try it. So I was like, dabbling with cigarettes before for a little bit. So we got together as 4 of them, and they had 1 cigarette. I'm like, I should have known something was up. They had 1 cigarette. All right, fine. So they pass around cigarette. It comes to me. I take a drag, inhale it. I cough a little bit, but it didn't taste like a cigarette right away. So I took another one, and they're all laughing at me. I'm like, what's up? They said, that's weed. So they filled the cigarette up with weed. And I was like, I started feeling a little high, and I went back to class, but all the windows in my head narrowed, and I could focus. And I'm like, whoa, this is interesting. So I started trying to find weed as much as possible. Yeah, I would, hang out with my friends and smoke like recreationally, but I never told anybody that it was actually having this type of effect on me. So I gave up all my prescription meds and never took any of it again, and just started consuming cannabis as my go-to medicine. So that's my first experience.
That's dope.
At the time, did you at that time, because I know it was like weed has always been this bad drug, did you have like the negative stigmas? Did you like, hey, that's for losers? Did you have that?
No, I thought it was all that your brain on drugs, Nancy Reagan bullshit. I thought it was all because I tried it and I didn't have that same experience.
Yeah.
But and I never saw anybody else. Like I did see a kid in high school who took too much acid, and I really changed him. But I've never seen anybody have this negative effect of weed. And maybe the weed we were getting back in the day, our nickel bags with like stems and seeds, maybe they had 10% THC, not like the shit we have today. So it didn't affect me as drastically as it does for some people. But I never felt that. I never felt the stigma around it. And I'll tell you what happened. So as I was consuming cannabis over and over, my parents would catch me. They're old school. They come from, Eastern Europe. And my dad really thought this was a drug. So they kept, punishing me and taking it away. And I kept battling back and forth. And I said, I'm going to still continue to consume cannabis. So my dad finally relented. He said, as long as you don't bring it in my house, it's legal. I don't want to don't bring it in my house. So I'm like 17. And we went out. I had fake ID when I was a kid. Went out, went to a club, came back, and went fishing. So we'd come home like 3, 4 in the morning and go fishing. And I'd come back and I sleep half the day. So I walk downstairs after I wake up in the afternoon, and my parents are sitting at the kitchen table, and I have my pouch, and I had a pouch underneath my seat in my car. We'll have my weed, my bowls, all this other shit. So I see they have this. I'm like, what's this? So we told you not to bring it in the house. I said, I didn't. I left it in the car. So that's my property. So we're going back and forth. And my parents say, well, we don't know what to do with you. You're a druggie and all this stuff. I'm like, I'm not a druggie. This is my medicine. They really didn't get it. So they ended up calling the cops on me.
Oh.
So 2 female officers came in, and they were like, oh, we're going to take you in. I said, okay, I've, under 28 grams is a misdemeanor. You fill out paperwork. I'll get out my own reconnaissance, do whatever you want. And the one lady is like, he's a smart ass. If it was my son, I would just kick him to the curb. And when they left, my dad said, you have 5 minutes to get your shit. So I went upstairs, packed a suitcase, and he literally kicked me out the door with his foot. And that was it. I was on my own. But the irony of this, my parents both consume products and formulations and things that we manufacture or our formulations for their own conditions now. And when I was in Jamaica, I got a chance to smoke a joint with my dad. So it all came full circle.
That's crazy because
It's pretty awesome.
I went through the same scenario. And I mean, I don't know the age difference between the two of us.
I'm 50.
Yeah, so you're not too much older. You only got a decade on me. So when I used to when I was younger and I used to smoke, we'd smoke, socially. And when you come home, especially like if there's events, you try to slide through without nobody really noticing you. You get your spray on before you come inside. You got to try to make sure you're right. Make sure you got all your T's crossed and all your I's dotted. And then as soon as I'm about to get to my room, right before I step through the door, Kevin, I gotta walk back in there. Where was you? I gotta put this focus face on because I know I can feel my face sliding. I can feel my eyes. I know that I'm looking some type of Asian or my eyes are really, really low. And I know they're just talking. They're literally saying shit to fuck with me. Oh, you was out there. You don't want nothing to eat? You sure you're not hungry? Yeah. Oh, you want to get some sleep? You look a little tired. Your eyes red. Was you crying? Like, what's going on?
That sounds like
here?
your dad, yeah.
Yeah, but here's the thing about it is my dad's a funny guy too. So nowadays, my dad calls me or texts me or shows me all the new devices that he purchases because oh, hey, I just got this new J roller. You want to see it? I'm like, what? What are you talking about? You know how many battles I had to go through to get to this point? You know what I mean? And now it's just a social norm. You know what I mean? When someone sees you smoking, or they don't even, it's like smoking a cigarette now.
Yeah,
I mean, for the most part,
a lot.
Countries,
it changed a lot. But here's the thing: I think that what helped my dad, first of all, all these people started coming to me after I got into the medical parts of cannabis, and I'll fill you guys into the gap of how I bridged that from being like homeless and to being where I am today. But people were coming to us with cancer, with all kind of conditions, and people that my parents knew, and we were helping them. So my dad finally, he had really bad arthritis in his one hand. And then he reached out. He's like, is there anything that you have? And I remember we created this product for bodybuilders. My friend was Mr. Olympian. He was going for Mr. Olympian. He's like, man, I work out twice a day. And my legs, he goes, when I work legs, it's so hard to work legs again because it gets so sore. So we made this product called Recovery, and it has some BCAA, some amino acids, and some cannabinoids and other things. And he won Mr. Olympia that year, natural physique, whatever. Not saying that I was responsible for that, but if we can help him even 1%, great. So sent my dad this Recovery, and he was taking him. He goes, my arthritis went away. I didn't even design it for that purpose. And they were going on a trip to Italy. And I said, hey, make sure you take your Recovery. It's got THC in it, but like take it out of the box and hide it. I don't know. Because he goes, I don't even need it anymore. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, the arthritis went away. It doesn't hurt anymore. So that was the experience. So he had this personal experience with it, and then he's fine. And now he tells people, like, he's so proud of it. And he tells people all the time, yeah, my son does this, and if you need anything, call him. So
I feel like
let's get the back now. We want to hit the backstory because you just skipped over a freaking monumental part.
Like, wait a minute, hold up.
How did you? Let's get there from you being homeless to now. Can you fill us in? Because I want to know. Yeah, I definitely want to know this.
So I started like this. So I had $500. I had a car, so I would get like motel rooms for a week, like $15 a night. The ones that they charge you by the hour. So I would sleep in that motel room with my clothes on because I don't want to touch anything in these motel rooms. And that I was dating this girl. She let me crash in her parents' house, and then they kicked me out. And then I was couch surfing for a while, and then I would shop at Tower Records all the time. I'm a big music guy, and one of the guys there was like, hey, I was looking for a job, and I just graduated high school, and I just started going to college, so I needed a job, and I didn't have a place to live. Like, well, you can work, we're hiring for a cashier. So I got a job at Tower Records in Philly as a cashier. And my grandma was alive back then. And she's like, well, you can stay with me. And I stayed on her couch for a while. And then she gave me enough money for a security deposit for an apartment. So I got this shitty basement apartment. It used to flood every time there would rain. I had roaches everywhere. So, but I got a job. And I was going to work in Tower Records. And then, smoking weed. And everybody there was smoking weed. And then people would come in the store and they would go, there's smell. Like, it smells like weed. I'm like, yeah. It's like, hey, you know where I can get some? I'm like, yeah. As a matter of fact, yeah. So I'm aging myself, but I had a pager, and I would give people my pager number, and it would text me this or page me this code, and I would have my buddy would go back to my place, and he would. So I started,
You was trapping.
It was a trap. Yeah, exactly. It was a trap house. Before there was such a thing, man. Before there was such a thing.
Pager. Oh,
exactly.
Okay. A little 5 for the dub. Okay. I'll be right there.
Exactly. It was like that.
Phone.
Yeah.
That's
so I was paying. I was exactly all that. Payphone, all that. So I had to pay my way through college. But the thing is that having this job at Tower Records gave me perks. I made $7 an hour, but I got free tickets to concerts. I got a ton of music, and got a ticket for this festival called the Horde Festival, HORDE, and went there, and it was like Ziggy Marley, the Black Crows, all these weed bands, and there was a group of kids that had a sign called the Cannabis Action Network. So I walked up to their table. I'm like, hey, what are you guys doing? Like, we're fighting for legalization. I'm like, how are you doing it? We're registering people to vote. I'm like, cool. What else are you doing? Registering people to vote. I'm like, okay. So I became the president of the Cannabis Action Network. And I held a rally at Independence Hall in Philly, the first ever rally for legalization. So Independence Hall is where the Constitution, Declaration of Independence are, all written on hemp paper, by the way. And my keynote speaker was this woman named Elvie Masika. So you may not know, but the federal government had a program for about 16 years where 12 people got federally prescribed cannabis for their conditions, some cancer. She had degenerative glaucoma. So the government grew cannabis in Mississippi, provided a license for legal cannabis, even though it's Schedule I, which means it has no medicinal purposes. But the government grew it for medicinal purposes and had a patent for neuroprotectant properties, and they still became an open patent a few years ago. So these pre-rolled cigarettes would get rolled in Carolina. They would come in a tin jar with a USDA label on them. And Elvie was a keynote. She was speaking on federal property with federal rangers, opened up her jar, lit up her pre-rolled joint cigarette, and nobody did anything. It's legal. It was 100% federally legal. And everybody crashed my house the next the day, and we got woken up to a loud noise. So I was dating this girl. She was an artist. She had a sculpture in her house that she made. And Elvie happened to walk into the sculpture and break it into pieces. And she was so apologetic, but she couldn't see. She was completely blind. So this is my aha moment. So I know it's medicine for me. I never knew it's medicine for anybody else who just smoked weed. I saw her medicating, and all of a sudden those muscles in her eyes released and she could see. I still wore glasses and all that stuff, but she wasn't blind anymore. And that was my moment where I said, wait a second, this is medicine for me. This is medicine for her. I have a different condition than her, and we're both consuming cannabis, and it's helping both of us. So let me try to dig in and dive deeper to try to see what the medical aspects of this amazing plant are. And that started my journey towards cannabis. And this was in Philly, and when my girlfriend, who then became my wife, who's now my ex-wife, she said, hey, it's time to get a real job. So I went to work for this company called Price Waterhouse, and I was I used to have, I know it's hard to believe, I used to have long hair, so I put in a ponytail, took my earrings out, wore a suit and tie.
I can imagine you with long hair, though. That's crazy. I could
all
see
that stuff. And then I was doing corporate work all that time, and I was trying to study, get as much stuff as I could on cannabis. Then we ended up moving to LA, and I met these guys through real estate that were trying to open up what they said was an alternative pharmacy. And I was like, what are you really trying to do? Like, we want to open up a dispensary. So I said, where's your paperwork? So we didn't have any. So I helped them with all their paperwork. This is back in 2009, and they offered me a partnership. So we opened up our first dispensary in Orange County in Santa Ana called Kush Kingdom. And that was, we ended up having 5 of them. But the thing that really set us over the edge is my one partner was sitting, he calls me up. He's like, hey, man, I'm sitting here with Corrupt from Dog Pound. I don't know if you guys know. So I'm sitting here with Corrupt, and he wants to name a strain after him. So I'm like, is there a computer? So I created an agreement, like a representation agreement. So we became the exclusive home of Corrupt's Kush. And then 6 months later, Mikey is my partner. He's sitting with, he calls me up again. He's like, I'm sitting here with Method Man. And I'm like, yeah, he wants to name a strain after him. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I see both of you.
Thanks for the children, man.
Yeah.
Wu-Tang for the kids, baby.
So you got the MF Doom shirt on.
Yeah. So we became the exclusive home of Corrupt's Kush and Method Man's Blackout OG, and it just like exploded from there.
That's fire.
So it was a fun time. But then I got a call from a manager of one of the shops. She's like, hey, the feds are here. What do I do? I'm like, whatever the fuck they tell you. And they ended up one after the other trying to shut us down. So last shop, I was with the guy from the Department of Justice, and he goes, let's go for a walk. I'm like, all right. So he goes, hey, man, I have no problem with dope. My mom takes it for a cancer. But we have orders. If you shut down, 14-day cease and desist, we won't prosecute. We won't do anything. And that was it, and shut it down. But it actually created this whole new passion for me, because all the whole time, I love the therapeutic aspects of this plant. And the one thing that I couldn't understand is why 2 people can consume the same cultivar, the same strain, and have a completely different experience. And that was sort of my mission. So my ADD, I can go like multitask a million different things, but when I get passionate about something, I can hyper focus. And this became my thing to try to resolve. So like one of the guys in the shop, he wanted to smoke some weed. He's like, hey, let's smoke. I'm like, yeah, cool, man. I got some, sativa dominant hybrid. He goes, no. That shit puts me to sleep. I said, no, sativa's up. Indica's down, right? He goes, not for me. Every single time I consume sativa, it puts me to sleep. So I was like, what is that all about?
Really?
Yeah. So we have a different experience. So I'm researching the internet. I came across a video by this guy named Kevin Mckernan. He was one of the first people who genetically sequenced the plant cannabis. So I started reaching out to him, and I was like, emails, trying to call. And I got a call from his assistant, said, Kevin's going to be in San Francisco. He's got 30 minutes to meet with you. And I'm in LA. So I'm like, all right, I got on a plane, flew to San Fran, met with Kevin for 3 hours. And he's like, we got to do something together. So I came on board as a consultant. My job was to travel around the US and Canada and get plant material from different growers. So I knew all the best growers. I would get their cannabis. I would bring it to my lab. They taught me all this stuff, extract the DNA, purify it, and send it to Boston to a sequencer. So we started the first genetic library of the actual strains. Here, so I'll give you guys an example what that means. There's all these names like Blue Dream. Let's use Blue Dream as an example, right? So we have Blue Dream, and I get 5 different Blue Dreams. And I bring them to my lab, extract the DNA. When I look at the DNA, 2 of the Blue Dreams that I got are pretty much identical. So we know that genetically they are Blue Dream. Yeah. 2 other ones have Blue Dream in them. So they're crosses. They're called Blue Dream, but they're not Blue Dream, but they have Blue Dream in them. And the 5th one that's called Blue Dream, it's not even close to Blue Dream. It's a completely different profile. So the point is, these names that we give these strains don't mean anything. It's about the cannabinoid and terpene profile. And that's when you get a personalized experience. So that was my journey.
Hold on. There's a lot of stuff there, but hold on. I'm gonna let y'all
Drake
go.
got lost. Drake got lost in the sauce.
No, I was with him. I was very interested in that. I'm gonna ask a question that I had a while ago, and then I want y'all to kind of go ahead and get in there too.
Okay, go ahead.
But there was so much in there. So, what would you say is the big issue from your professional point of view? Right? Is the big issue with the government and the the drugs that they say, hey, take this thing that, you know, has addictive tendencies to it, that we kind of make sure is addictive, and weed that, you know, you can grow yourself if you want, or you know, you can get from your, you know,
Is that for
what
all
would
of
you say
us?
is the biggest issue with the government and what you do?
I mean, it's money, you know. So it all comes down to the money. You follow the money, and the reason why cannabis is still Schedule 1, besides all the besides all the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act bullshit,
I was about to
the
talk
reason
about that.
why the reason why cannabis is legal is 100% racist. It only has to do with that. That's why it became legal, and then Richard Nixon created the schedule of drugs. And if you guys know the history, you know, cannabis was brought over. It originated in Southeast Asia. It was brought over and cultivated in Mexico. So the original cultivars were from Southeast Asia, which are the indica plants. And then they had also in Africa, South Africa, and also some of the Caribbean islands, they grew the original landrace sativas. So they both, and the reason why it makes it an indica and sativa has to do with the essential oils that the plant produces, which in cannabis is called terpenes. So these terpenes give the cannabis its smell, and they also have an effect. So the ones that grew around the Kashmir region or Southeast Asia, Nepal, and all that, they grew. They had this really diesely, musky smell to them, and that has to do with an oil terpene called myrcene. Myrcene is sedative. That's why the indica is sedative. It has to do with that terpene. And the other ones grew in a climate that was more towards the sun, like Durban poison, which grew in South Africa. That's a pure sativa. So that has dopamine and some GABA receptor binding. So it gives you a boost up, right? So that sativas give you the up, indicas give you the down. So anyway, when those crops started coming into Mexico, Mexican farm workers started growing marijuana. We never called it marijuana before. And when they started coming over to the U.S. as workers, and they started bringing that over, they started getting into the jazz musicians. This is in the late 20s, most like. And what happened was the jazz musicians, I don't know if you guys know from that era, jazz created where people of all races and colors could coexist and dance and hang out. And the jazz musicians would consume cannabis. They would smoke weed that they would get from the Mexican farm workers, who were calling cannabis, sativa, marijuana. That's why they started calling marijuana. And what happened was the authorities at that time, they didn't like that their white daughters were hanging out at jazz clubs, dancing with black musicians, listening to black music. So they William Randolph Hearst was the first person that actually started doing this. He started lobbying all these wealthy people to put together this task force, and they got this guy named Harry Anslinger in place, and he was the first person that started locking people up for cultivating cannabis. Our forefathers, everybody who came over, they brought cannabis with them. You know, George Washington used to have it, Thomas Jefferson, all these people who came and discovered America, and they all grew hemp and cannabis. And the sails, the uniforms, the ropes, they're all made out of hemp. So this was a cash crop. And what happened was, because William Randolph Hearst, they discovered the chemical formula to make paper out of wood. So him and DuPont, and also fabrics, they started making synthetic fabrics instead of hemp, which was competition for them. So they passed in 1937. They passed the 1937 Marijuana Stamp Tax Act. So anybody who grew cannabis crops would get taxed, thousands of times more than. And then they started incentivizing farmers to convert their crops to corn instead. That's why we're the biggest producer of corn. That's why corn syrup is and everything, because we have an abundance of corn from that time. Wow. And then they started locking people up. So for a long time, that was we were under this 1937 Marijuana Stamp Tax Act. And then when Richard Nixon took power, he couldn't stand this, what he called the hippie culture, the Jew culture, who are hippies, and all this stuff. And then he put together a task force that actually, if you read it, did not find cannabis to be a addictive or substance and found it to have a lot of medical benefits, and he squashed it. His own task force. He put it aside and rescheduled cannabis as a Schedule 1 narcotic, which has no medicinal purposes. So that's how it became illegal. So going back to your question, I know it's a worded answer, but I want to give that history. So going back to your question, the reason why we have the system in this country the way we have is all because of pharma. We're the only country that is a for-profit medical system. And what happens is when the FDA is involved, you have to go through a process of creating a medicine. If it's not a medicine through the FDA process, then they can't make money off it, right? So cannabis has somewhere over 400 different components to it. And the pharma industry is used to one, maybe two. So they initially started creating this synthetic THC called Marinol, and they would give it to AIDS patients who were dying in pain and cancer patients, and it wasn't working. It would make them sleepy, but it didn't give them the munchies. It didn't work the way cannabis works because it's not just one component. Yep. So the main reason why it's still illegal is because there's only one company in the world who has an FDA-approved drug that came from cannabis. It's called GW Pharmaceuticals. It actually just got acquired by a company called Jazz Pharmaceuticals, and the product's called Epidiolex. So it's specific for a kind of epilepsy, childhood epilepsy called Dravet syndrome. And that was created from CBD. But the next product that they try to get past the FDA, it's called Sativax, which is a 1-to-1 CBD and THC. So it's moving in that direction. The only way we're going to get over this hump is by rescheduling or descheduling cannabis, working with pharma to create clinical trials for different components in the plant that are going to be for specific medical conditions. That way we'll get it legalized. Pharma can make money. The government can make money. And then we also have the second constituents, what I feel is going to be nutraceuticals that have all these different components in the plant. So if I go to my vitamin shop, I can go consistently buy my cannabis product. And the reason we have the biggest issue now is because we have inconsistency. It's not federally legal. So my California product is not going to be the same as the product I get in New York, same product as I get in Florida. And this is the way we need to work on to elevate the game so it's consistent throughout and tested so we know exactly what we're putting in our bodies. And that's when I think it's going to be legal.
Jeez, that's you breaking down the history. I heard that story a lot of the time. They would say that, what was the movie that they came out with in what was that, the 1950s?
Talking about Boston George?
They got
Reefer Madness.
Reefer Madness that got everybody in hysteria to say, "Hey, this is a."
So I'll tell you about Reefer Madness. It's a great point. So William Randall Hearst funded that, and they used to have movie theaters. So what they would do is Edison and those guys, they would own movie theaters because he created and they would show Reefer Madness before the premiere of the movie. So all the wealthier people that could afford to go to the movies, before they see their movie, they would have to see Reefer Madness. And Reefer Madness is this thing that, this guy smokes a little bit of weed and then he kills his girlfriend and then he has psychosis and jumps out the window. So they started creating a scare tactic. And that was part of the thing that William Randall Hearst funded.
Yeah, I heard about that because I did a lot of research on it, and they said, it was, the reason marijuana was a drug because it was competing with the cotton business and all. Because hemp was like anybody can grow hemp, and it was you can change it in anything, paper, clothing. It was
it was competing. It was competing with cotton and tobacco. Those are the main. Those are the main lobbyists. They had all the money, and they were like, "Yeah, man, this is this is pushing us out. Let's get rid of these guys." Yeah.
What doesn't make sense to me is how you can classify marijuana as a class 2 drug, but still have it recreational, like a recreational use. Because you don't see someone saying, "Oh, this Percocets out here, it's a class 2 drug as well," but it's not recreational drug at all. They know. You know what I mean? Big Pharma got control of that whole situation. So how are you able to make it legal federally, but still be able to enjoy it recreationally without you having to go without you having to have any legal issues.
You just deschedule it. I mean, look, think
I
about
mean,
it.
like at the moment right now. See, we're in Jersey, so it's legal. It's recreational in Jersey.
Yeah,
but it's still federally illegal. So it's like, where do you fall? You can get in trouble, but you can't get in trouble. You see what I'm saying? It's like, if a cop decides, all right, yeah, you got this little bit of amount, or he could be like, oh, you're just a little bit over, you're going to jail, federal. You know what I mean? It just seems too much of a gray area.
Cop can't do anything federally. So what happened was when they signed the Cole memo in as law, what happened was part of it's still Schedule 1, so it means it has no medicinal purposes whatsoever. However, under the Cole memo, it gave rights to the states to supersede the federal government when it comes to cannabis. So the state law supersedes federal unless you're actually crossing state lines, which you can't do. So whatever law is in Jersey, the police that's in Jersey, the cops in Jersey, they abide by the law, and it doesn't have federal jurisdiction. So state comes before federal. That's the law in the U.S. now. But what happened, if you think about it, there's already a formula to do this. Alcohol was illegal. We had prohibition of alcohol. Yeah. So what happened there? All they did was lift prohibition. They didn't deschedule it. They didn't reschedule it. They didn't make alcohol Schedule 5. They just took it away. And then there is there's a business associated with alcohol. This is the same thing that can happen with cannabis. And that's what I'm saying. There's got to be two lanes. There's got to be a medicinal lane where farmer will make their cut. And then there's got to be the other lane where the Teamsters will make their cut as distributors of cannabis. Yep. And think about it. It's an agricultural crop. At the end of the day, it's big ag. So you have Monsanto, who's already in the cannabis business. And there's no way to fight it because you have billions and billions of dollars in agriculture to medical to distribution. And that's the way we're going to be able to have these two lanes. There's a medicinal aspect to this plant, and then there is the recreational aspect of this plant. But everybody's got to get their cut. Once everybody figures out how to make their money, now we deschedule it and we can enjoy it all over without being concerned.
That's what I always thought. I said once they figure out a way to tax this and get their money out of it, they're going to lift it because what is it? Colorado was the first. And I know they seen how much money Colorado was making. It was like, how do we figure this all out for the rest of the United States as much as this one state is making?
Yeah, you're absolutely. Colorado, they tried to legalize in California first. They knew they weren't going to do it, so they moved to Colorado and said it's a smaller state. Let's give them a model that shows that it works. And then you see the rest of the country. I mean, you have 37 states that have some sort of cannabis program. But there's two things that actually happened. One of them was Boehner, who was the Speaker of the House at that point. He was a big opponent of cannabis and really lobbied against it. And when he was retiring, he got a job at a multi-state operator called Acreage Cannabis. And he changed his whole tune. And he was like, I believe in cannabis now, crying. And I think they paid him a lot of other green to be able to say that. Yep. And then the second thing is Mitch McConnell. When you see what happened in his state of Kentucky, they started pushing for hemp. And if you look for the reason why CBD is everywhere is because they passed a farm bill and Mitch McConnell actually sponsored, because he started seeing, you know what, my state's losing money. How can we grow this crop and tax it? So if you go to Kentucky, there's a lot of places that had like RJ Reynolds logos that used to be tobacco farms, but now they're growing CBD, hemp. And the way they grow it and the hemp that we consume in our bodies, I'll describe the experience. There's a combine that goes through, takes down the entire plant, stalk, everything with the leaves, takes it all in, throws into an industrial dryer, dries it, and then excretes what's called crude oil. And that's all these hemp products that we put in our bodies, like the CBD, a lot of them, they come from that crappy hemp that's growing there with all instead of just the bud itself. So, it's ag. That's the way it's going to be, big ag.
You know what's sad? like hearing all this, and we all knew this before, is that it seems like every single thing that people are fighting for, what's wrong or what's right, all the stuff that like the people at the local levels are fighting for, it was all influenced by money. Like it wasn't that, oh, this is wrong and it could hurt you, and this is alcohol is this, and it's like, nah, we couldn't figure out how to make money off of it back in the day, or nah, somebody decided that they wanted to just kind of campaign against it, using it as a platform, but it's really all about money. It's not about right or wrong.
Or racism.
Or racism, which
is even worse.
Goodness gracious, Jesus.
It's a combination of both, right? So, but this is the history of this country, right? This is the way this country operates. Because if you're think about it this way, it's a crop, it's a plant, it's a weed. It grows anywhere. So if somebody can grow it anywhere, that means that I can't monopolize it. I can't synthesize it. I can't make money off it because anybody can grow it, in their backyard. So we need to create laws that are going to prevent you from growing your own plant, and we want to control it. So wait, it's illegal. It's a Schedule I, but we grow it. The government grows it. We have a huge a facility to grow cannabis. Well, why are you growing it? Well, just because. Why are we growing it? I don't know. Why are we growing it? Who knows? Why are we growing it? Are we doing research with it? We're not. So there's a reason. And I have a friend, Dr. Sue Sisley. She was one of the first people that did a clinical trial on cannabis. And in order for her to do that, she had to get a DA license and get her cannabis from Mississippi, from University of Mississippi, where the federal government grows it. When she got her, it was freeze-dried, frozen cannabis. When she got it, it was full of mold. She had to remediate the mold from that cannabis in order to give it to veterans for their clinical trial on PTSD. So she had to pay for the remediation herself.
Insane.
Jeez.
Insane.
Just,
They want to help.
Most of this stuff, like I've been listening to a lot of different podcasts and hearing different people speak on it. So most of this stuff I know, man. I'm thinking probably within the next maybe 15 years, what they're gonna do to allow people to grow in their backyard is gonna be some kind of tax. You come down to your local police station or government building and you say, hey, I want to grow X amount of this in my backyard. And they be like, hey, okay, you got to pay this much on your property tax, or you got to have this, you put this in your window while you're growing it. It's $50. It's $50.
That's what it's going to say.
Yeah, it's whatever. It's going to say something like, hey, you have to have this in your window while you're growing it. The date has to match of how, that you came and you paid for it. And when it expires, you're good. Because that's the only way I can see it all being legal, just straight across the board. They
get a license. You get a license. So the way they're proposing to do in certain states, you buy a license to cultivate. So you pay the government and you renew that license on an annual basis. And that license allows you to grow 6 plants, and that's it. So they can go and see if you're growing 12. No, now you're in trouble. But basically, maybe they'll have other licenses. Like you have a class 1 license that allows you to grow 6. You have a class 2 license that allows you to grow 12. That's exactly it, what you're saying. They're going to tax it and they're going to charge you a fee for that. And you got to renew it every year.
But let me ask you a question, and I don't know if you have the answer for me. What if I do know people with their own, business and everything. My wife has family that has businesses in Jersey, in Trenton, right across the street from the courthouse, and kind of down here. But if I wanted to, I'm just a guy, and I just wanted to start my own weed business, whether that be CBD or something like that. Like, what advice would you have? Like, how would I go about starting that? You know what I mean? Like legally.
Yeah, well, CBD is different. CBD is controlled under the Farm Bill. And as long as you comply with whatever the regulations of the Farm Bill, you can cultivate and you can produce CBD products and sell them in most states. Now, THC, anything over 0.3% THC or more is considered cannabis. So even if you're growing hemp, but it has some THC, as long as it's under 0.3%, you're good. 0.3% or above, you have to get a state license. Whatever the state requirements are for Jersey, for instance, you have to buy a license. It can be millions of dollars for certain states. So I know that states like Missouri were charging $50,000 for a license. They have hundreds of dispensaries because it was affordable for some people, not like millions. So you have to figure out what it is that you want to do in the business. There's so many different things that you want to do. Do you want to be a grower? Do you want to cultivate and then just sell your crop to a retailer that's going to sell it in their store? Or do you want to be the retailer? Or do you want to be the manufacturer, meaning that you'll take that crop and you'll create oil from that or another product and you'll make vapes or you'll make tinctures or some of that. So you have to figure out there's so many different areas of the business that have, or do you want to be a distributor, meaning that you'll just buy other people's, white label it, create a brand and resell it. And also different states have different laws. Like Florida is a fully vertical state. What that means is that if you have a license, you have a vertical license. That means it's seed to sale. So you have to grow it. You have to cure it. You have to dry it. You have to distribute it. And you can only sell it out of your stores. So that's that. So every single state has its own laws. Like Pennsylvania doesn't have that. You can have a cultivation license, so somebody will cultivate, and you can have a separate retail license. But the one thing that Pennsylvania did that I think is really interesting and beneficial, every single licensee, dispensary, or whoever has to take a percentage of their earnings and contribute it to a fund that actually funds research at 5 different universities for cannabis research. So now, like Temple, Drexel, all these different universities, they actually have cannabis research programs that are actually looking to see what the medicinal aspects and benefits are of the plant.
Yo, I'm so glad we had this interview. Let me ask you one more question, and I'll let my co-hosts get their stuff in. It's a weird question that I have. I'm sorry, y'all. Hold on, give me 1 second. What in the world is Delta 8?
Great question.
I have some. I just don't know what it is, and I'm scared.
Yeah, well, you should be, because Delta 8 is an isomer. So it means that there's a loophole, right, in this law of Delta 9. Delta 9 is tetrahydrocannabinol, which is THC. Right. So Delta 8 is an isomer, means that it is a man-made synthetic version of Delta 9. So I'm going to
K2.
I had a great scientist who I was trying to figure this out too, and he drew a little diagram. We were having lunch somewhere, and he's like, "Let me explain to you what the difference between Delta 9 and Delta 8 is." So think about a receptor. Your receptor has 3 holes in it, and Delta 9 has 3 prongs. So it fits perfectly. Those holes fit perfectly in those prongs. So that's THC, and then you release anandamide. So Delta 8 has 2 prongs that fit the 2 receptors, and the third one sits on top. So it never actually fully, so it gives you a little bit of anandamide, but it doesn't fully give you what the feeling of THC is. So it doesn't get you as high as Delta 9 would, but because it's man-made and because it's an isomer and it's a synthetic, we don't know what the different side effects of having this synthetic in our bodies are in the long term. So I just try to avoid anything that's a synthetic substance, and that's Delta 8.
So throw it away.
Yes.
You call me. I
and then call me.
I would go for Delta. Go for Delta 9. Delta 9. You can't go wrong. And think about it this way. Look, if you had that experience with it, maybe looking at sublingual delivery or combustible. Look at the amount. What happens with these distillates and these isolates and these cartridges and all that stuff? Think about it this way: when back in the day, your cannabis maybe had 7, maybe 10% THC. Now they're growing plants that have up to 30% THC. Yeah. If you're getting a concentrate, which is moon rocks or dabs or oils or any of that, you're looking at 60, 70, 80%. The worst experience that I had was consuming a distillate that was 99% THC. As soon as I consumed that, my heart started jumping out of my chest, and I don't have these predispositions. And I really felt like, oh my God, what is happening right now? My brain, I couldn't even speak. And look, there's a use for these things. If somebody's in palliative care, end of life, in extreme pain, instead of a morphine drip, they can consume that. But for the regular consumer, it's unnecessary. And what happens is your receptors get bound with the THC. So every single time, over time, you need more and more and more. And if you're starting with that, how much more are you going to need? And it leads to these adverse experiences with people that I think are unnecessary. So starting low and slow and using different flower, sublingual delivery under your tongue, that's usually a safer way to start consuming cannabis. The good news about it is, how they say you need more. With cannabis, the receptors reset themselves after a pause. So if you stop consuming for a day, 2 days, a week, your receptors reset and you start over again. So it's not physically dependent. It's the only one of these drugs that doesn't have physical dependence.
Talking about this guy. This guy,
Hey, boss.
he smokes about.
It's a lot of weed.
He's
made of weed.
He'll over exaggerate.
Okay,
No, he's not this one.
No, I'm not.
Not this one though.
I smoke about 4 grams a day.
Enjoy
around 4 or 5 grams a day. And I enjoy it thoroughly.
Test him.
If you want to save some money, take like a week off, and then you'll start.
Oh yeah, I'll stop like for 2 days just so I can get back to that.
There you go.
Get back to that normal. Oh yeah, I've been doing this for a long time. I know about the resets.
You got it down.
I know about the resets. I take mushrooms and all of that. I do the same thing with mushrooms. I wait about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, let myself reset because it's the same thing with mushrooms.
Yep, I do the same thing.
Yeah, see, that's a great time.
You microdose during the day, and then you have a hero dose, and after that, you give yourself a couple weeks break.
Yep.
For receptors to reset themselves, and you can go.
Yeah, that blissful state in the mushroom, that is an energy draining situation. It's that 6 hours of bliss that you get when you're on that actual good mushroom trip. That very next day, I don't do shit. I don't do a damn thing. I do nothing. I don't eat. I don't smoke. I don't do nothing. I'm asleep. And then I wake up, I go to the bathroom, I let the dogs out, I go back to sleep, and then I wake up in time for my wife to get home for dinner.
There you go. That's recovery. You got to recover.
Yeah.
It is draining, but it is great.
Well, so, you have your own podcast too, right?
I do. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's called Everything is Personal. So this is the way it started. Like I was being interviewed for the Green Entrepreneur magazine, which is the Entrepreneur Magazine's cannabis version magazine. And the guy that was interviewing me, John, we had like a 20-minute interview. And then we started just talking. He's a New York guy, I'm a Philly guy. And we started talking like old school hip hop. And he's like, who's your favorite, old school hip hop guy? I'm like, Schoolie D. And he goes, me too. He goes, Schoolie D? I'm like, yeah. So we would just call each other and riff music, mostly music. And he produces podcasts, and he's like, we should do a podcast together. I'm like, what are we going to talk about? He said, the same shit we talk about now on the phone or whatever.
Yeah.
So we started a podcast, and then he had some other obligations after the first like 30, 40. So that's really, I took it on. And basically what I do is I interview people just like this, who I'm curious about. Sometimes we talk cannabis, not always. Some people are not consumers. We talk about music. I'm curious about people. So when I talk about everything is personal, I want to know the individual story. There's so many people that come on and they just, they talk about their business or talk about their product. I want to know about you. Like what happened? What's your story? What was your childhood like? And that's really what my podcast is like. Anybody I'm curious about, I'm interested in, I try to dive deep like that.
I love that. I love that because that's what it looked. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Nah, you was gonna say we're the same because when I read your bio, I was like, I want to talk to this guy, man. Yeah. We just talk that same thing we do here. We just want to talk to people that we're interested in, man.
That's how we started. Dre was the inspiration for this whole podcast, and he pretty much said the same thing. He was like, why don't we start a podcast? Me and Kev were like,
no, I said that to y'all.
I thought Dre.
No, I said that to y'all. I brought that up to y'all. But man,
so look, I'm about to say
it was me, dude. It
Hey,
was me.
the highlight of my podcast though, like from that whole thing, I had Schoolie D on, and
Oh,
that was my favorite. And I had a lot of, and no offense to Be
Awesome.
Real, and no offense to Chris Schwartz and Roughhouse.
It's going to name drop.
I love all you guys, but Schoolie D is that's my guy. I'm a Philly guy, and that's my guy. And he does not disappoint. If you listen to it, he is the greatest. Like his interviews, he gives no fucks. He's the greatest.
well, tell everybody where they can find your podcast at so they can
Yeah.
check you out, man. You know,
Yeah, it's everywhere you listen to podcasts and Apple, Spotify. It's called Everything is Personal. I have a book out. You can get it on Amazon or Target, wherever books are sold. It's called Making Cannabis Personal. I think there's a copy. Oh, here. Making Cannabis Personal.
I seen that.
Yeah, that's my book. And
seen it.
it's got pictures of me with long hair in it. So and my company, man, like this is the thing. We're focused on precision medicine. Cannabis is only one part of it, but we believe using DNA is a start. If you like, people talk about 23andMe and all these things. By the way, you don't have to swab using our kit. You can use, if you've already done like a 23andMe or an Ancestry.com, you can take your data and we will translate it and provide you a report on your endocannabinary system. But the overall goal, my overall passion, is precision medicine. So starting with DNA, think of it as your GPS system. So it shows you what genetic predispositions you may have. So you are empowered with information to take action. DNA is not locked in. It's pre-encoded. Your lifestyle can turn those switches on and off. So if you have a predisposition to something and there's a certain, cannabinoid ratio that works for you, how do you know it works for you? So we measure that through biometric feedback. So I have like a biometric device that we created, which is called the EndoLink device. And what that does to an app, I'll give you an example of sleep. So recovery, we talked about sleep and recovery. Yeah. How do you know that you're getting good quality recovery sleep? And people who are under a lot of stress, they're sort of on this hamster wheel. If you're not getting recovery sleep, alpha, theta, how do you're basically still agitated. So we want to make sure that you have the right protocol that works for you individually. And we measure the efficacy of that. How well is that protocol working for you? And all that information goes to the cloud. And then we use machine learning, like AI, to make better predictive inferences. So it's truly a personalized experience. Now we do personalized vitamins and nutrients based on yourself. What are you deficient in? So what do you need to add to that? And the skin, even like, what are your predispositions for skin? What type of oil, lotions, what will work better for you? Are you predisposed to eczema? How can you avoid that? So by knowing these genetic predispositions, you can make better decisions for yourself for your overall health and wellness.
So I can figure out a way to, because I have a major problem with focus. So I actually, and this is off the podcast stuff. Yeah. When you spoke about the windows in your mind, and I meant to bring this up earlier because that really touched me. When I was in school, especially taking the SATs, I got an 800. I don't know how they grade them now, but 800 was very extremely average, if not below, right? But I'm a smart guy. But what would happen when I would take these tests is, and I swear to God, songs would play in my head without, I don't trigger them to play. I would have to read a paragraph 4 or 5 times in order to understand what it was saying, because just songs would just play over and over in my head that I liked. So I would be able to figure out what would help me with that, because I'm a 38-year-old man. Same thing.
Absolutely. But the first thing you got to think about is ADD or ADHD, now that's called, it can be used as a superpower. Some people call it a disorder. It's not a disorder. It's a superpower. So what happens with ADD is you're born with a depletion of dopamine. So you're not producing enough dopamine. So your brain is always searching for the next dopamine hit. So an example of that is, that's why all these thoughts keep popping up. That's why music keeps popping up, because those songs you like, they connect with you and they squirt dopamine from your brain. And so video game designers sit there and they design video games specifically for kids with ADD. So they keep getting that dopamine hit. So they sit there for 8 hours or 12 hours to play video games. So when you're looking for a dopamine hit, when you find that, that's when you're going to be able to focus. And you can create systems for yourself that allow you to be able to work within, like, I'll give you a really quick hint. So when you create your list of things to do, I have to work with lists. If I don't have a list, then I don't know, I forget, my mind drifts in different directions. But your list should never be more than 7 things. So what you do is you go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These are my things that I need to do. Right. Once you complete 2, 3, you give yourself a reward. So you give yourself a reward of dopamine, whatever that means. Go for a hike, go for a walk, smoke a joint, whatever that may be. So you're always rewarding yourself and you're giving yourself that dopamine hit. And if you have more than 7 things in your list, your brain says it's like 1 million. It just freaks out. So just keeping it like little chunks. You give yourself a chunk, you do that, you complete that task, and you reward yourself. There's a million different things you can do, but there are formulations that we've made. There's one called Focus, actually, that helps you to stimulate that dopamine and GABA. That'll help you to focus a little bit more as well.
Wow.
Thank you. You blew our mind with this interview, man.
Yeah, for real. I appreciate that. I'm over here. I'm gonna do some research because I might grab some books. I don't know if any books you can suggest, but yeah,
There's plenty of research, but you can do your DNA test too, and you can find out which genetic predispositions you have. See if your ADD is genetic. See if it's environmental, because there's environmental ADD too, because we have stimulates all over the place. So once we figure that out, you can find different things besides things that you can consume. Systems. Working within systems has been a godsend to me. And I was an ADD coach for high functioning executives, CEOs. So I did that for about a year and a half, because I was doing and for myself, and other CEOs were like, can you coach us and teach us your systems? I'm like, sure, no problem. So these are all my systems that, be happy to share them as well.
Nice. Perfect.
Man.
Hell.
Man.
I'm telling you, man, I'm a sciencey guy, and I can go deep, man, but
no,
that was great.
No, this is a perfect interview. We got to wrap it up because we got another one we got to do out there. But man, where everybody can find you at, where can they find your business? This is, your business, run it down one more time, get it clear. And then we're going to end it.
The company is called ENDOCANNA-Health. Our website is Endo, ENDODNA, endodna.com. It's a DNA test. You can get it there, and be happy to share a code with your audience. If you want for a discount, be happy to share that as well. But you can find me there. My name is Len May, Lenmay. I'm on all social networks. I think Instagram is Len May DNA. Same thing with Twitter, Facebook, Len May, LinkedIn, YouTube. So I'm here.
All right, man. Y'all got that. Y'all got that, guys. Len May, man. We appreciate your time, man, and jumping on with us, man.
Yeah, that was
definitely
fire.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate
good information.
Good information. We'll catch y'all later. Thanks again.
Peace.
Peace.
Peace.